Sure, my name's Armon Dadgar. I'm one of the co-founders of HashiDays along with Mitchell. We started the company about 10 years ago now, and my role there is CTO, so pretty much manage all of our product and development, IT, security, and spend probably half my time traveling to meet with customers. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, this is the first HashiDays, so it's kind of an interesting experience doing it in Paris, London, and Munich at the same time. It's kind of a fun trial, but it's been really fun. It's cool just to see how crowded it is and sort of full house and lots of enthusiasm. So it's been fun, and we have ridiculously nice weather in London. So yeah, I mean, it's a super interesting question, and so we just released our sort of 2023 State of the Cloud Strategy Survey, and I think one of the things we look at is sort of like what's the organizational approach to cloud and how's that evolved over time, and how's multi-cloud evolved over time. And I think what's interesting is when we look at the data over the last few years, a few trends become really obvious. One is that multi-cloud is continuing to accelerate, right? So when you look at the number of customers who are 2 clouds versus 3 clouds versus 4 if you include private data center, right? You're seeing that sort of continue to grow, right? So I think that notion of enterprise as sort of a single cloud, I don't think that's going to be the reality. They're all going to be multi-cloud, right? So I think that's interesting. I think the second is we're seeing a pretty big divergence between, I'll call it high maturity and low maturity organizations. And I think the key distinction between them is how prevalent and ubiquitous their adoption is of platform teams. So I think where we see people really struggle with cloud at scale is the low maturity orgs where they don't have platform teams. Every app team is doing whatever they want, and it's sort of a ad hoc approach to cloud, versus the high maturity orgs that have standardized process, central platform teams, really focus on developer enablement through common tooling, and how they're much more likely to be delivering kind of the outcomes that they wanted. And it's like you really see that diverging in the data, especially over the last few years. So I think that's been an interesting trend, and I think platform teams feel like they're accelerating as a concept. And I think part of that's driven by cost, right? I think especially over this year, last year, as organizations look to kind of get their hand on how much am I spending in cloud. I think having a platform team, having that central strategy lets you actually do that. So I think that's been a driver and accelerator of it. But I think those are kind of continuations of what we've seen over the last few years. Yeah, I mean, when we think about the challenges around multi-cloud, I think what's loud and clear is number one is skill shortage, right? It's finding people who understand multi-cloud, even understand single cloud, right? I think there's a big skill shortage gap. Then I think for sort of organizations that are operating at massive scale, their challenge is a consistency one, right? It's like what I don't want to do is have one methodology in Amazon, second in Google, third in Amazon, or in Azure, fourth in on-prem. So for them, it's what we will call sort of a cloud operating model or a cloud maturity model. It's how do they mature to the point of having sort of a standardized common approach across the clouds versus trying to manage 5 different things and training everyone 5 different things. So I think those are probably the two, and they kind of compound each other. When you take the skills gap plus the sort of fragmentation and complexity of it, I think those two sort of add up to being sort of the top challenge.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think for us, Kubernetes has always been a huge part of the ecosystem. So some of the announcements today were specifically around Vault and Kubernetes. And so there, what we introduced is what we're calling the Vault Kubernetes secret operator. So that effectively acts now as a bridge between Vault and Kubernetes to basically read the secrets out, automatically sync them into Kubernetes secrets. And then for things like dynamic secrets, we can integrate to do things like a rolling deploy. So if the secret changes, we'll basically update the application and trigger an automatic upgrade. So the applications kind of can integrate with Vault without having to really be Vault aware, basically. And that's on top of a bunch of what we've already done in terms of Helm charts and other operators and Vault secret integrations and authentication integrations. So yeah, we're super excited about that. I think the community feedback over the last few months has been super positive.
Excellent, cool.
Yeah, I think for us, Zero Trust has been, we've been sort of working on it before it was a buzzword and before people kind of talked about it. I think it was all the way back to 2015 with the introduction of Vault. For us, the way I really think about and frame Zero Trust is about 3 pillars, right? One is it's about forcing an authentication and authorization of everything, right? I don't trust you just because you're on my network. 2, it's a shift to a default deny posture, right? Like just because you're Armon and you're trusted doesn't mean you should have access to everything, right? What do you actually need access to? And the third is a shift to identity-based approach, right? So my policy shouldn't be based on IP address or something like that where it's dynamic. It should be based on your user identity, your service identity, etc. So to me, those are the 3 principles around how do I get to sort of a zero trust concept. And so our investments across that have been multiple products, right? Vault, obviously, our longest investment in it in terms of how do you do machine-to-machine identity and secret management and all of that. It's obviously based on least privilege, default deny, identity-based, etc. Then you have Boundary, which is sort of the newer piece of the portfolio, which is the human side of it, right? So how do I do human-to-machine access, right? So I'm a database developer and I need production access to a database, or I'm a developer and I need to SSH into production. So I think that's where Boundary is really filling that human to machine gap of really kind of combining what was maybe traditionally privilege access management with VPN or SSH bastions to say, my users aren't on the network, it's all identity based, they have a default deny unless you have a rule that says you have access to a system, you don't have access, and you never have access to the network. So I think that's a big investment for us around Boundary, and we had some cool updates today. And then console is the third pillar of that, which is, okay, machine to machine, how do I do network segmentation, but not at an IP level, but at a service level, right? I want to say service A can talk to service B, whether it's on Kubernetes, whether one's on Amazon, the other's on Google. And I think that's the kind of third pillar for us, is like, how do you really do sort of machine to machine or app to app, the kind of zero trust way. So those are kind of the three pillars, and I think lots of updates across all three of those today. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the biggest challenge we see in the market is the skills. So to us, it's sort of a multi-pronged effort, right? On one hand, there's always a product investment of like, how do you make it simpler? How do you lower the bar? Certainly from our cloud managed side, it's like, how do you deliver this stuff as a cloud service to make it easier to consume and people have to run it and upgrade it and operate it? So that's one big, focus area for us is on product side and a cloud investment. The second is really an education side. So we have a pretty large team that works on our learn guides, our documentation, our developer portal, right? So if you go to developer.hashicorp.com, tons of content, materials, self-guided courses, and then we've layered on top of that a certification program. So now you can go through and get, level 1, level 2, level 3 certified on the different products. So that's a big focus in terms of education and solving some of that skills gap. And then I think the third big piece of it is working with our partners, right? So we have an extensive partner ecosystem, folks like Amazing, to really look at, okay, how do you augment the skills that organizations have by bringing in partners who can do services around our products, right? And that's where we certify our partners on their competencies, right? To say, great, they're a Terraform expert, a Vault expert, a console expert, okay, you can bring them in and they can help you with these programs. Because I think a lot of organizations don't have enough of the talent in-house. So to us, we think about it through all of those mechanisms. Let's get the products better, help create and educate the market, and then build a partner ecosystem that can support customers on their journey.